You know that feeling? The one where your emotions just feel like they're, well, lying to you. Maybe you're wrestling with the aftermath of a big change and the sadness or the anger feels huge, maybe disproportionate somehow.
Yeah, overwhelming.
Or maybe you're carrying this like persistent heavy weight, guilt or shame about stuff you logically know wasn't totally your fault.
Or maybe even about who you fundamentally are.
Exactly. It's that really confusing sense that what you're feeling doesn't quite line up with reality right now. Or maybe it's, a ghost from something way back.
Right. Trying to make sense of it all.
Yeah, you're trying to navigate loss or figure out these complex relationships or just understand your own reactions, and your internal emotional compass feels broken, pointing everywhere.
Completely haywire.
So this deep dive is all about unpacking those moments, those really tricky emotional experiences where our feelings might not be the whole truth.
Or maybe not even our truth at all.
Right. We've been digging into a stack of really fascinating sources for this one, looking at analyses that shine a light on grief.
The complexity of it.
Sifting through psychological research, trying to untangle the subtle but really important differences between shame and guilt.
Which is harder than it sounds.
Definitely. And we also immersed ourselves in some incredibly raw personal accounts. They give these vivid, real-world glimpses into how these emotions grab hold, especially when they become what the sources call toxic.
Yeah, those toxic forms are powerful. We've also looked at clinical perspectives too, right? How intensive therapy can help people process these deeply buried feelings.
Reclaim their emotional landscape, as one source put it.
That's right. So our mission today really is to help you get a clearer handle on these difficult emotions. We want to help distinguish between those natural, healthy responses.
Like sadness after a loss, or feeling genuinely sorry if you messed up.
Exactly. Healthy regret. And then contrast those with the feelings that might be, distorted. Feelings rooted in past experiences, maybe trauma, or even, feelings that are a result of manipulation by others.
Where do they come from, these overwhelming or kind of false-feeling emotions?
That's the big question. And crucially, how can we actually challenge them, understand where they really come from?
And hopefully move towards a truer emotional understanding, healing even.
Yes. Finding that authentic emotional truth.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Starting with something absolutely fundamental, loss.
Grief, yeah. It's maybe one of the most universal feelings, but also one of the most complex to navigate, isn't it?
For sure.
At its core, grief is that really profound emotional suffering you feel when something or someone you love is taken away.
And we often think of death first, obviously.
We do, but the sources really emphasize it's a natural reaction to any significant loss.
Right. And the list of things we can grieve is it's way wider than people often think.
Absolutely. The sources lay at this whole spectrum, beyond death of a person or a pet.
Which are huge in themselves.
Of course. But also things like divorce, a major breakup, losing your health or physical ability, financial instability, miscarriage.
Even things like retirement or letting go of a dream you had.
Yes, or a friendship ending, losing your sense of safety after trauma, selling a home you loved, moving.
Even things that are supposed to be good, like graduating or changing jobs.
Those too. Any big transition can involve loss. The key point, and this comes up again and again in the material, is that any significant loss to you can trigger grief.
It's personal.
It's totally personal. And your emotional response to your loss is valid. Completely valid. Doesn't matter what anyone else thinks is appropriate to grieve. If it mattered to you, the loss is real.
That's so important to hear.
And crucially, the process itself, grieving, is intensely individual. There's absolutely no single right way.
No wrong way either.
Nope. And definitely no normal timetable. Healing is gradual. It takes the time it takes, weeks, months, sometimes years.
It's not that neat linear thing, is it? Like those stages people talk about.
Exactly. The classic 5 stages, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, they're often really misunderstood.
Where did they even come from?
Well, the sources point out they were originally observations by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross of terminally ill patients processing their own coming death.
Ah, okay. Not necessarily for grieving someone else.
Right. Even Kubler-Ross herself later said they weren't meant to be this rigid, step-by-step framework. Her point was more that there isn't the typical response, because there's no typical loss. Everyone's experience is unique.
So thinking of it more like a roller coaster?
That's a much better analogy, I think. It reflects the actual experience much more accurately. You get these intense peaks and valleys.
Moments of calm, then suddenly you drop back down.
Exactly. Despair, yearning, It can hit you out of nowhere. Initially, the ride is usually wilder, right? Deeper lows, less predictable.
Yeah.
But over time, while those intense feelings might still pop up, they tend to get maybe less frequent, shorter in duration.
But they can still surprise you, even years later.
Oh, absolutely. It's perfectly normal for grief to resurface with surprising intensity. Anniversaries, holidays, significant life events.
Or even just a random smell or a song, right?
Totally. Triggers are everywhere. And it's not just emotional. The physical toll is huge.
Yeah, you mentioned that. It's not just feeling sad.
Not at all.
Yeah.
The emotional symptoms are profound. Sure, shock, disbelief, that deep ache of sadness, yearning, emptiness, despair.
Anger, too, sometimes.
Yeah.
Guilt, fear.
All of those.
Yeah.
Anger, resentment, confusing guilt, fear, anxiety, helplessness. Sometimes even relief, which can be confusing too. But the physical side is very real. Overwhelming fatigue is common. Nausea. Your immune system can take a hit, so you get sick more easily.
Weight changes. Trouble sleeping.
Definitely. Weight loss or gain. Aches and pains showing up. And insomnia is a big one.
Wow. So in the early stages, feeling like you're going crazy isn't unusual.
Not at all. Feeling like you're losing your mind, questioning your deepest beliefs about life, about yourself, these are common responses. Your reality has been fundamentally altered by the loss. It's a shock to the system.
And this is where we start seeing how grief, even though it's natural, can sometimes feel like it's lying or distorting things.
Precisely. While the core feeling the sadness, the pain, is a true reflection of the loss.
It's real.
It's absolutely real.
Yeah.
But the sheer intensity sometimes, or the duration, or just the way grief can completely flatten you.
Making it hard to function.
Right. Can't sleep, can't eat, can't focus, can't think straight. That overwhelming nature can feel like the emotion itself is disproportionate or somehow disconnected from the present.
Like that initial shock and disbelief you mentioned.
Exactly. Those are emotional symptoms, but they make it genuinely hard to accept the new reality. You might feel numb, or you might catch yourself expecting the person or pet to just walk back in. It's not like the emotion is denying the fact of the loss, but your whole system, mind and body, is struggling so hard to integrate this massive change that it creates this really disorienting sense that your feelings are out of sync with what's real.
That makes a lot of sense. The feeling is real, the loss is real, but the experience of the emotion can feel unreal or just completely beyond your control.
Yeah.
Which brings us to, well, a pair of particularly tricky emotions, the ones that often get tangled up together.
Ah, yes.
And where this idea of lying emotions becomes even more central, guilt and shame.
Right. And psychologists do acknowledge it's challenging to perfectly separate these two in practice. They often trigger each other, feed off each other.
Like a feedback loop.
Kind of. Yeah. But keeping a distinction in mind is incredibly helpful, especially for understanding and healing, particularly when trauma is involved.
Okay, so what is that core distinction the sources talk about?
Generally speaking, guilt is seen as relating more to actions.
Not things you did.
Or things you failed to do that you feel you should have done. It's that feeling of discomfort, regret, remorse.
When you think you've caused harm, maybe, or broken some kind of moral code.
Exactly. And when it's healthy guilt, it usually motivates you. It makes you want to make things right, apologize, make amends, or at least change your behavior going forward.
So healthy guilt is kind of outward focused on the behavior and fixing it.
That's a good way to put it. Now, shame. Shame is typically understood as relating more to identity.
To who you are.
Yes. It's the belief that you are a bad person.
Yeah.
Fundamentally flawed because of what you did, or sometimes just because of who you are.
Wow. That's different.
It's very different. Shame isn't just regretting a specific action. It's believing you are inherently defective, unworthy, fundamentally wrong.
That sounds incredibly painful.
It is. It's that pervasive feeling of constantly beating yourself up, feeling like you're ugly or stupid or just intrinsically less than other people, different in a deeply shameful way.
It sounds much more paralyzing than guilt, like an attack on your core self.
It absolutely is. And there's some interesting neurobiological thinking around this too.
Oh, yeah.
Some theories suggest shame might develop earlier, maybe around 18 months. It's seen as a kind of primitive inhibitory signal.
Like warning you about social rejection?
Potentially.
Yeah.
Linked to potential boundary violations, maybe more connected to the right side of the brain. Guilt seems to come later, maybe ages 3 to 6.
When kids start understanding rules and consequences more?
Exactly. As the left hemisphere matures, along with self-observation, understanding social norms, cause and effect, its neural pathways seem more widespread.
So that difference in timing and brain processing might explain why they feel so different, even when they show up together.
It might contribute, yeah. And understanding this difference isn't just academic.
No.
Not at all. It's crucial for healing, especially with emotional trauma. If you're trying to work through difficult past stuff, figuring out, am I feeling bad about something I did? That's guilt. It needs addressing actions, maybe amends, self-forgiveness for the act.
Okay.
Or am I feeling bad about who I fundamentally am? That's shame. And that requires addressing core beliefs about your worthiness, your identity. It's a different path.
And shame sounds like it could be more isolating.
Profoundly so. Perhaps more than any other emotion, shame convinces you that you're fundamentally unworthy of connection, love, acceptance. It makes you want to hide.
Which brings us right back to where these emotions can feel like they're telling outright lies. The idea of toxic guilt and toxic shame.
Exactly. This is where it gets really interesting and unfortunately deeply impactful for so many people. Not all guilt or shame is healthy or helpful.
They can be toxic versions.
Yes. Versions that aren't based on what's happening now, but are often installed in us during difficult, abusive, or manipulative pasts.
Okay, let's start with toxic guilt. What does that look like?
Toxic guilt often comes from that harsh inner critic, doesn't it? Or from internalizing past abuse, or just completely unreasonable expectations from parents or caregivers.
Like hearing those old tapes playing.
Exactly. That relentless internal voice echoing old messages. You're not good enough.
Yeah.
You're not trying hard enough. You haven't sacrificed enough. You're selfish for wanting things. And this feeling isn't tied to something specific you actually did wrong today. It's rooted in this deep-seated false belief about your own inadequacy or obligation that got planted, often way back in childhood.
So it's not about regretting a recent mistake, but this constant painful feeling of being insufficient no matter what you do now.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's guilt without a real present-day cause that matches the intensity. And then there's toxic shame, which is often seen as even more foundational, more damaging.
Oh, so.
It's like taking normal human flaws, imperfections, vulnerabilities we all have, and blowing them way out of proportion. It leads to this pervasive feeling of being ashamed just for existing as you are.
Wow, just for being you.
Yeah. It creates this core belief that you're fundamentally flawed, intrinsically defective, therefore unworthy of love, belonging, happiness, unless you constantly earn it.
Through performing or hiding.
Exactly. Maintaining some kind of perfect facade to hide the badness you believe is inside you. The sources often call this toxic shame the basic wound of childhood trauma or persistent invalidation.
So it's not about doing something wrong. It's the crippling belief that something is wrong with you.
At your very core, irreparably wrong.
The sources had some incredibly powerful examples of this. That story about the person feeling intense guilt about going no contact with their narcissistic mother.
That's a perfect illustration of toxic guilt in action. The source was clear. The guilt wasn't because they were actually doing something wrong, like abandoning someone truly deserving of support.
It was about something else.
It was coming from resisting a lifetime of conditioning, brainwashing essentially. Pushing back against this ingrained pattern of needing to cater to the mother, manage her, try to win love or approval that never really came.
So the guilt was a control mechanism.
Exactly. A deeply conditioned response. A tool the abuser used, consciously or not, to maintain influence. Feeling that guilt keeps the person stuck in the old harmful dynamic.
Wow. And that other detailed story about the Costco trips, feeling guilty for not helping the mother enough, buying her groceries because she had none, cooking for her despite complaints.
Yeah, that vividly shows how someone can be, as the source put it, Pavlov trained. Trained to feel guilty just for prioritizing their own needs, their time, their money.
Or even just for the other person's lack of planning.
Right. The guilt in that situation wasn't rational. It was a trigger, designed to create immediate emotional pain that forces the person to act, do whatever stops the bad feeling, which just reinforces the manipulation.
She felt guilty because her mother ate poorly, even though she was trying to help. Like it was her fault.
Yes. It shows how toxic guilt gets disconnected from logic or actual responsibility. It becomes about these conditioned emotional buttons being pushed.
And what about that false guilt? Feeling guilty for leaving abusive parents or worrying you caused their loneliness later on?
Another clear example from the sources where guilt is fundamentally lying. The person feels terrible guilt for consequences that stemmed from the parents' choices. Their abusive behavior, their refusal to change. They earned the estrangement.
But the guilt tries to make you feel responsible.
It does. It's a struggle to see that setting a boundary, leaving abuse, isn't a failure on your part. It's self-preservation.
Yeah.
It's necessary because the other person made a healthy relationship impossible. The guilt twists that reality.
So toxic guilt really blocks healthy boundaries, keeps you stuck, makes you feel selfish just for taking care of yourself.
Absolutely. And toxic shame. Even more paralyzing. It fuels constant hypervigilance, always expecting rejection, always waiting for your flaw to be discovered.
Driving that need to buy affection.
Yeah, through overgiving, people-pleasing, perfectionism, all while feeling perpetually not enough. One source called toxic shame the master emotion.
Wow.
That internal voice constantly whispering condemnation, making you feel flawed and defective deep down. It's this core wound.
And it can be passed down, too.
Often, yes. Through patterns of control, criticism, judgment, emotional withdrawal, it gets transmitted generationally, sometimes subtly.
So, okay, toxic guilt and shame aren't just painful. They're prime examples of emotions that genuinely lie.
They really are.
They don't reflect a current reality of you being bad or wrong. They're like echoes, phantoms.
Exactly. Powerful, lingering echoes of past trauma, manipulation, false beliefs, convincing you you're unworthy when you're not. They're like phantom limbs of past pain, sending crippling signals to your present self.
Distorting how you see everything.
Yeah.
So the huge question then becomes, if these emotions feel like lies, like phantom pains, how do we challenge them? How do we find what's true and start to heal?
That's the critical next step, isn't it? And the sources offer several important pathways. There's a big focus on healing shame and guilt, often through the lens of self-forgiveness.
Self-forgiveness. That can sound tricky, especially if you know you genuinely did hurt someone.
It can. But the sources argue pretty strongly that constantly beating yourself up, staying stuck in self-condemnation, is actually unhealthy. It rarely leads to positive change or real amends.
So forgiving yourself isn't about letting yourself off the hook.
Not necessarily. Paradoxically, forgiving yourself can be a powerful motivator for change. It releases that paralyzing internal resistance, that self-attack.
Freeing up energy.
Exactly. Energy that was tied up in self-punishment. It allows you to connect more authentically with yourself and others and potentially make meaningful changes. The sources outline 4 key avenues that help with this.
Okay, let's walk through those. The first one is self-understanding.
Yes. This means gaining real insight into why you acted the way you did, especially if your actions caused harm.
Understanding the context.
Yes, particularly if harmful behaviors are linked to your own past trauma, like childhood abuse or neglect. Understanding how trauma impacts brain development, emotional regulation, relationships, it helps explain why certain patterns emerge.
Like repeating cycles of abuse or addiction as self-medication.
Those are common examples. The sources mention how stress, new challenges like parenthood, or even just being reminded of past trauma can trigger these deeply ingrained patterns.
If you were abused, you might not have learned healthy parenting skills yourself.
Right, leading to difficulty bonding, repeating negative patterns, maybe not protecting your own kids because you never learned how. And sometimes seeing your own vulnerability or trauma responses in your child can be incredibly triggering.
Leading to lashing out from a place of self-hatred.
Tragically, yes. So understanding these deep underlying causes, the chain reaction from your own history, helps you move beyond just condemning yourself for the behavior. It helps you address the root wound.
Seeing the pattern, not just the isolated action.
Yeah.
What's the second avenue?
Common humanity.
That sounds inherently compassionate.
It really is. It's a powerful antidote to the intense isolation that shame creates.
How does it work?
It's the deep recognition that everyone has harmed others. Every single person has made mistakes, said hurtful things, acted selfishly. We've all caused pain at some point.
Knowing you're not alone in that.
Exactly. Knowing you're not uniquely monstrous or flawed because you messed up fosters self-compassion. Again, it's not about excusing the behavior,
Right.
but it dissolves that isolating self-hatred that shame feeds on. And when you release that, you free up energy. You can think more clearly about making amends, contributing positively.
Shifting from self-attack to potential repair and growth makes sense.
What's number 3?
Earning your forgiveness. This is where responsibility really comes into play.
Okay.
It means honestly acknowledging the wrong you did, taking full responsibility for your actions. The sources say this starts with admitting the truth to yourself first. Brutal honesty.
And
Then, if it's possible and appropriate, admitting it to the person you harmed.
that sounds incredibly hard, facing the person you hurt.
It can be one of the hardest steps. And a vital part of this is offering a meaningful apology. not just mumbling, sorry.
What makes it meaningful? The sources outline specific elements, expressing genuine regret for your actions and their impact, clearly accepting responsibility, no excuses, no blaming, promising not to repeat the offense, and sometimes asking for forgiveness.
Apologizing like that, especially for something big like past abuse, takes courage.
Immense courage. You face potential rejection. But the sources say it removes that cloak of shame for the apologizer. And even for someone lacking remorse, it reminds them of the harm.
And for the person who is hurt, like an adult child receiving that apology from a parent.
It can be life-changing. It validates their reality, helps them stop blaming themselves. It's huge for their healing. And for the person apologizing, going through that difficult process actually builds self-respect and self-esteem. You're aligning your actions with healthier values.
Building self-worth through facing hard truths? Powerful. What's the fourth avenue?
Asking a higher power.
Okay, a spiritual dimension.
Yes. For many people, when guilt and shame feel completely overwhelming, too big to carry alone, turning to something larger than themselves offers profound comfort, compassion, a sense of forgiveness or cleansing.
Through prayer or maybe more formal practices.
Exactly. Whatever fits their beliefs, personal prayer, meditation, structured confession. For a lot of people, integrating this spiritual aspect is a necessary part of finding peace and self-forgiveness.
So those four. Deep self-understanding, recognizing common humanity, taking brave responsibility and making amends, and seeking spiritual comfort. They offer real ways to chip away at that toxic guilt and shame.
They provide kind of map, a way to navigate out of being stuck in self-condemnation towards a place where real healing and positive change can actually happen.
Beyond these more conscious steps, the sources also talked about intensive psychotherapy, how it can create space for these deep emotional breakthroughs, especially when feelings are really buried or tangled up because of trauma.
Right. It's not just about understanding why intellectually, but about actually experiencing and processing the feelings safely.
And that clinical case study of the healthcare practitioner was really illuminating here.
Incredibly so. She came to therapy struggling with intimacy, feeling emotionally numb most of the time.
Except for those bursts of intense anger.
Exactly. Sudden, intense anger that felt like another person taking over. And intense sadness. She intellectualized everything, talking about what I should be feeling.
And she had this wall against fear.
A huge barrier. Because expressing strong emotion, especially anger, felt incredibly dangerous based on her childhood.
So she was totally disconnected, walled off from her feelings as protection.
Pretty much. Therapy involved identifying those defenses, that dissociation, especially from fear. At one point, she connected her anger to this really visceral physical urge to harm someone.
That fantasy about attacking the phone operator.
That's the one. And through the really difficult process of confronting that fantasy, letting herself feel the raw anger, something else happened.
What was that?
She was able to feel sadness for the person she'd imagined hurting. The therapist identified it as compassion. It revealed this other, buried part of her emotional capacity right alongside the rage.
A huge breakthrough, showing she wasn't just rage and numbness.
It was significant. Then she also identified guilt. She described it as deeply uncomfortable, making her sad, wanting to run away or punish herself.
Through self-neglect, pushing people away.
Yes. Her response to guilt wasn't healthy remorse or repair. It was self-punishment and isolation. The emotion was tied to self-destructive patterns.
Okay.
Later, addressing even deeper trauma, childhood molestation. Intense fear of her father brought up even more buried emotion. She noticed this pattern where she might bypass anger completely.
And go straight to
feeling depressed, just this profound, heavy sensation, and an emotional shutdown.
Fascinating. The system just skipping over the rage.
Shows how complex trauma's impact is. As she processed the buried rage around the molestation, she felt intense physical stuff, boiling, burning sensations, and these vivid, violent fantasies about her abuser.
Squeezing his neck, bashing his head. Those sound incredibly disturbing to face.
They are. But the sources stressed the crucial part wasn't just the violence of the fantasy. It was where it ended.
How did it end?
It culminated not just in his death, but in this profound feeling of relief. Satisfaction, even. Seeing him at peace in death felt like it washed away all the ugliness.
Washing away her shame and guilt. Even though he was the abuser.
That was the core realization. This breakthrough moment allowing the intense rage and the relief, the satisfaction, to be fully experienced safely in therapy was directly linked to her finally feeling free of shame and guilt about that specific trauma.
Because the shame wasn't actually hers.
Exactly. It was his shame from his actions that got transferred onto her through the abuse. Feeling the full, messy emotional response allowed her to finally differentiate.
That's key. The feeling wasn't a lie about the abuse or the justified rage, but the shame she carried about the abuse, the belief it made her bad. That was the lie.
Precisely. A lie about her own worthiness, her blamelessness. Experiencing it all let her separate her true feelings from the shame that was projected onto her. That was the start of real liberation for her.
And how does she feel afterwards?
The description was light, excited, hopeful, but also scary. A fear of the freedom.
Healing isn't always comfortable then.
Definitely not. But pushing through those incredibly difficult feelings and understandings leads to profound change. Reclaiming yourself from emotions that weren't yours to carry.
That case study really drives home how vital it is to understand where our tangled emotions come from, especially from trauma, and how allowing ourselves to feel everything safely helps us differentiate, separate our authentic feelings from projected shame or toxic guilt.
It shows you sometimes have to journey through the absolute worst of it, the most intense feelings, to get to the truth, to break free from the emotions that feel like lies because they don't belong to your true story.
Okay, so let's try and bring this all together. We've looked at grief, natural, but super individual, not linear, affects you physically and emotionally.
Right, and triggered by any significant loss.
We've dug into that subtle but really key difference between guilt about actions can motivate repair and shame, which attacks your core identity. And then we really examine toxic guilt and toxic shame. Those feelings rooted in the past, trauma, abuse, manipulation, that function like emotions that lie to you about your worth, your blameworthiness today.
Yeah, those phantom pains.
And we've talked about pathways to finding emotional truth, those 4 avenues for self-forgiveness.
Self-understanding, common humanity, earning forgiveness through responsibility and amends, and seeking higher power support.
And we saw through that clinical example just how powerful it can be to safely experience and differentiate those really difficult buried emotions, to free yourself from shame and guilt that wasn't yours.
Absolutely. It's about reclaiming your emotional landscape.
So the core lesson here seems to be, while our emotions are vital signals, they aren't always objective truth, especially when shaped by trauma, unhealthy relationships, or past manipulation.
They can be distorted echoes.
Yeah, and learning to spot when guilt or shame feels toxic, when it's serving an old wound or someone else's agenda, not current reality, that's a critical step.
A really empowering step.
Challenging those feelings, uncovering your true emotional landscape. It involves understanding the source, letting yourself feel fully but safely, and actively working towards self-compassion, self-forgiveness.
Becoming a more discerning, compassionate observer of your own inner world, rather than just being swept away by it.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. If you just consider the possibility, just try it on for size, that some of your most persistent, painful emotions, maybe that chronic guilt or pervasive shame, what if they aren't actually a true reflection of who you are today? What if they were placed upon you, conditioned into you, transferred onto you by past experiences, by other people? If you entertain that possibility, what freedom might that offer you?
What might that allow you to explore about your feelings, maybe with fresh eyes?
Nothing to think about. See you next time for another deep dive into the ideas hidden in the sources you share with us.